Welcome to CBR. Daredevil is born again, which means there are some villains around for him to fight. One of them is Bullseye. Today, let's deep dive into the character's origins, abilities, and secrets. Watch out, spoilers for Daredevil Born Again ahead. The first 2 episodes of the new show within the MCU, Daredevil Born Again, are finally available on streaming. Foggy was killed by Bullseye, Wilson Fisk is now the mayor of New York City, but not all is lost. Matt Murdock is officially back in business as Daredevil. Episode 1, titled Heaven's Half Hour, starts with a shocking sequence. Matt and his friends are at Josie's bar. Foggy suddenly answers a phone call from Benny, a client he stashed at his apartment. Someone had been tracking Benny, who we soon find out is Poindexter. In reference to Foggy's death scene in the Daredevil, Volume 2, number 82, 2006, Poindexter, now Bullseye, shoots him in the chest from a distance. Bullseye then shoots 2 other police officers who come out to help and approaches Karen. But thankfully, Matt puts on his Daredevil suit and stops Bullseye. They have an intense fight scene that ends on the roof of the building. Once Matt hears Foggy's heart stop beating, he becomes so enraged he pushes Bullseye off the roof. The villain falls on his stomach in a way that would have killed anyone. So how did that fall not kill him? To answer that question, let's recap Bullseye's origins until Dex's last appearance in the Netflix series Daredevil during Season 3. Portrayed by Wilson Bethel, Bullseye's real name is Benjamin Leonard Poindexter. He first appeared in Daredevil Season 3, Episode 2, Please, long before turning into Bullseye. In fact, his arc in the 11 episodes he appears in on Daredevil tells his origin story. Dex is a US Army veteran who becomes an FBI sniper. Well, not just any sniper, but one with remarkable precision, capable of ricocheting bullets and using any object to hit a target. However, he suffers from severe mental instability with psychopathic tendencies, a condition stemming from severe childhood trauma. After the death of both his parents, he was transferred to an orphanage where he lived until he turned 18. Even as a child, he displayed a natural talent for marksmanship, but also a disturbing behavior. He began using his talent for evil ends, like killing a bird with a rock. His only stabilizing influence was his therapist, Dr. Mercer, who helped him develop coping mechanisms to control his violent urges. However, when she died, Dex lost the only person keeping him stable and ignored all he had learned. As an adult, working for the FBI, Dex would frequently murder criminals on the job and claim to have to use lethal force in self-defense. In reality, he used that as an excuse because he enjoyed killing people and could not control his murderous tendencies. Everything changes for Dex when he is assigned to protect Fisk out from Rikers Island after the criminal cuts a deal with the FBI. During the transportation of Fisk to the presidential hotel, they are suddenly attacked by the Albanian syndicate. Dex takes them all down by himself, catching Fisk's attention. At first, Dex did not trust Fisk at all. However, through his mental breakdowns and his constant exposure to Fisk's manipulation, that slowly changes. Fisk identifies Dex's psychological weakness and manipulates him into developing a father-son dynamic. Fisk exploits Dex's loneliness and obsessive tendencies, particularly his fixation on Julie Barnes, a former co-worker he barely knew but stalked relentlessly. Fisk has Julie killed to further destabilize Dex, ensuring that Dex has nowhere to turn except to him. Soon, FBI agent Ray Nadeem uncovers evidence that Dex is working for Fisk. That, combined with how brutal his defense against the Albanians had been, makes Dex lose his job at the FBI, and Fisk is there to offer him more missions. During his time working for Fisk, Dex demonstrates the full extent of his abilities. In a talent for combat that nearly matches Daredevil's, he takes down large groups of enemies using everyday objects as deadly projectiles. His brutal assault on the church, where he massacres innocent people, is a chilling moment. Dex becomes Kingpin's ultimate pawn when the villain convinces him to wear a replica of Daredevil's suit and pretend to be the vigilante. Fisk sends him to attack the New York Bulletin and assassinate Karen Page while pretending to be Daredevil. While Kingpin's plans to frame Daredevil as a public enemy partially work, Dex eventually realizes he was being used. When Matt tells Dex how Fisk had been lying to him and orchestrated the murder of Julie Barnes, the villain goes on a rampage at Fisk's wedding, attempting to kill his former boss. Dex eventually fights both the real Daredevil and the Kingpin at the same time, but Fisk ultimately overpowers him, breaking his back against a wall and leaving him paralyzed. This leads to Dex being subject to an experimental procedure that could potentially fix his paralysis in Daredevil Season 3, Episode 13, A New Napkin. He comes into contact with Dr. Kenji Oyama, who suggests replacing his backbone with the rare and valuable metal alloy called cogmium. Adamantium is what is used in the comics to fortify the villain's bones in most versions of his origin story, but the series replaces it with cogmium. Dr. Kenji Oyama, also known as Lord Darkwind in the comics, is a significant character in Marvel lore because of his transhuman discoveries. In the MCU, he has only appeared in that one episode of Daredevil Season 3 so far. He is the mastermind behind the process that is eventually used by others to bond adamantium to Wolverine's skeleton. But before Weapon X took over the scientist's findings, Dr. Oyama used Bullseye, who was already a mercenary, as a guinea pig. While the show does not confirm any details about Oyama, his inclusion strongly hints at a potential for his involvement in the development of Weapon X. With rumors of the X-Men ushering a mutant saga after the end of the current multiverse saga, Dr. Oyama's experiments with cogmium seem more relevant than ever. Cogmium does exist in Marvel Comics as well, just not in Bullseye's bones, which makes virtually no difference in the character's abilities since the surgery. Adamantium would only be introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in 2021, with Tiamut's emergence controlled by the Eternals. So this was an ingenious way to go around the lack of the metal alloy in the franchise for Bullseye's origin in Daredevil back in 2018. While the Netflix show never explicitly explores his post-surgery abilities, the Daredevil Born Again pilot gives us some insight into Dex's abilities as the newly realized Bullseye. Even before his surgery, Dex was already an elite assassin with nearly superhuman precision and reflexes. His abilities include perfect accuracy as a shooter at any distance and being able to turn any object into a deadly weapon. He is also excellent in hand-to-hand combat, being an expert in several martial arts. The surgery in Daredevil Season 3 not only restored his ability to move, but reinforced his spine. He now has a superhuman endurance due to the bionic enhancements made of cogmium in his back. With this full recap of the origin of Bullseye in the MCU, let's clear up the confusion around the sudden assassination of Foggy Nelson in Daredevil Born Again. The attack on Foggy happens seemingly out of nowhere, leaving part of the audience struggling to remember the villain's 2018 arc that justifies it. Back in Daredevil Season 3, Dex did not know Matt Murdock was Daredevil, but since the three-way fight with Kingpin and Daredevil went sideways, leaving him injured, Dex seems to have discovered Daredevil's true identity at some point in time, between the Netflix series finale and the Born Again pilot. In Daredevil Born Again, he goes after Foggy and Karen while they are hanging out with Matt. This means that Dex either wanted Matt to see his friends die, or he thought he would kill Matt that night as well. Either way, it's an act of revenge for the way things turned out for him in Daredevil Season 3, which he apparently blames Daredevil for more than Kingpin. As a former FBI agent, Dex has the tactical skills to gather intelligence and make big discoveries. Still, it's unlikely he could have figured out Daredevil's secret identity without a little help from someone else. Whether intentional or not, Bullseye's actions bring out the worst in Daredevil. The villain could have targeted Foggy and Karen to show the world who Daredevil really is, and he is immediately successful. Daredevil tries killing Bullseye in retaliation immediately, who only survives being pushed off the roof because he already had the cogmium enhancement. At the same time, it's likely that Bullseye will go after Kingpin as well. While we wait for more Daredevil Born Again episodes to find out, let's see if the character's history in the comics can hint at any developments within the MCU. Bullseye in Marvel Comics is primarily known by a different name. On Earth-16, the villain mostly goes by the name Lester for decades. Benjamin Poindexter is one of many aliases Lester uses in his criminal schemes, which inspired the Netflix show to make up a new character called Poindexter and give him a version of Lester's arc. Bullseye first appeared in Daredevil number 131, published in December 1975 using the Dex alias. In one account of his childhood, from Elektra Volume 2 number 2, it is said that he painted a bullseye on the forehead of his abusive father to shoot him dead one time when he was passed out from drinking. He worked briefly for the National Security Agency before realizing his true calling was being a mercenary, a job that allowed him to satisfy his urge to kill. Before meeting Daredevil, he came into conflict with the Punisher and worked alongside fellow mercenary Deadpool. But these stories were told in retrospective in Deadpool Volume 3 number 16. In his debut story, Bullseye is hired to murder the lawyer Matt Murdock. Of course, Daredevil stops Bullseye before he can get to his target. Since Bullseye never missed a target before this encounter with the vigilante, he considers Daredevil to have completely ruined his reputation forever in that moment. He swore vengeance, starting a lifelong rivalry. Lester possesses an extraordinary intellect, but also intense obsessive tendencies. His single-minded determination has often worked to his advantage, though, particularly when he locks onto a target. He has been known to meticulously absorb vast amounts of information about his adversaries, using their history and behavior to predict their next move. Bullseye studies his enemies' backgrounds, relationships, and skill sets in exhaustive detail. This fixation frequently becomes deeply personal, as seen in his disturbing obsession with Elektra throughout their many encounters. Once hired as mercenary to kill the Kingpin, Bullseye ended up taking a more lucrative deal and switching sides to work for him instead, as shown in Daredevil 170 to 172. However, after another run-in with Daredevil that led to his capture and imprisonment, Bullseye returned to find that Kingpin had replaced him with Elektra. Enraged by being cast aside, he targeted Elektra and executed her using nothing but a simple playing card and her own weapon in Daredevil number 181, 1981. This act cemented his place as Daredevil's arch-enemy, turning one of the most infamous rivalries in Marvel history even darker. Later, in a 1983 storyline, Bullseye is found while almost dead by the Japanese crime lord known as Lord Darkwind after falling from a New York City skyscraper during a fight with Daredevil. Lord Darkwind decides to save Bullseye's life and mend his broken bones with adamantium pieces, turning them essentially indestructible. But that, of course, was not out of the kindness of his heart. Lord Darkwind saw Bullseye's potential and wished him to become his own personal assassin. However, once fully recovered, Bullseye had no intention of being anyone's servant. He returned to his life as a mercenary, operating on his own terms in New York City. Following the severe injury that left him paralyzed, Bullseye became even smarter. No longer relying solely on his physical skills, he sharpened his ability to anticipate patterns and strategize. When back on his feet, he continued using all skills he had picked up while paralyzed. At this stage, his ability to hit a target was no longer just about precision, but orchestrating psychological warfare and anticipating the ripple effects of every action he took. Throughout his career, Bullseye completed numerous assignments for the Kingpin while also taking on contracts from various other employers. One such job put him at odds with the Punisher while working for Rosalie Carbone, a prominent crime boss. In another infamous mission, Mysterio hired him to abduct a child from St. Maggie's Church, leading to a tragic encounter where Bullseye murdered Karen Page. This act only further fueled Daredevil's rage towards him. When Daredevil's secret identity was publicly exposed, Bullseye saw an opportunity. He aimed to exploit the revelation to eliminate his longtime adversary once and for all, while simultaneously aiding the Kingpin in maintaining control over the criminal underworld. In Daredevil Born Again, the scene where Bullseye falls from a rooftop and survives could be a nod to his comic book history, where he has endured similarly impossible falls without dying. One notable example is from Captain America number 374, published in 1990, where he falls multiple stories and lands on a car unscathed. Unlike the Netflix version, Bullseye in the comics has no confirmed real name. Over the years, he has used several aliases, including Lester and Benjamin Poindexter. Anyway, his true identity remains uncertain. But what fans seem to find the most confusing about his comic book history is how exactly his adamantium-laced bones work. Wolverine, being a much more popular character, immediately comes to mind when discussing the procedure done to Bullseye. We all know Wolverine would die from adamantium poisoning if he did not have a healing factor. Bullseye has no healing factor, so how can he survive such a procedure? While the MCU can easily explain this with the usage of a different metal alloy, Marvel Comics goes further to explain the logic behind Dr. Oyama's experiment on Bullseye. Wolverine is a mutant who already had a healing power and bone claws that come out of his knuckles. He then had his entire skeleton, including his claws, coated with adamantium. Meanwhile, Bullseye is a regular person who had specific bones, such as his spine, skull, and fists, reinforced with exo pieces made of adamantium. This means his bone structure can still work properly, including producing white blood cells to fight adamantium poisoning. While Wolverine was experimented on in the hopes of turning him into an immortal human weapon, Bullseye's procedure was a corrective surgery after being paralyzed. It was not as extreme as Wolverine's, but it did make him overall stronger and more durable. With adamantium replaced for cogmium in Bullseye's origin story, however, the MCU won't need to worry too much about coherence in relation to Wolverine. And finally, while there are many mysteries and secrets surrounding Bullseye in Marvel Comics, one hidden fact about him in particular seems relevant in the context of the MCU's current stage and upcoming releases. Did you know that Bullseye was once in the Thunderbolts? Yes, the team that will soon be introduced into the franchise has also had a long history in Marvel Comics, having had many different iterations. In one of them, Norman Osborn takes control over the team and manipulates them into following his political agenda. Osborn places Bullseye within the Thunderbolts as a sleeper agent. Bullseye also later infiltrates the Avengers, posing as Hawkeye. After he and Osborn lost their final fight against the Avengers, Bullseye once again switched back to his criminal persona.
Benjamin Leonard Poindexter, you have been convicted of 11 counts of murder in the first degree.
Who knows? Maybe one day Daredevil characters can cross paths with big screen characters like the Thunderbolts, and Bullseye may join the team once more. For now, tell us your expectations for Bullseye in Daredevil, Born Again. How do you think he will return again? Until next time, thanks for watching CBR.